Hello and welcome to Membership Talks. Very excited to talk about how to geo-clone your membership with Paul Gordon, international consultant, which is a great name. And yeah, I guess over to you, Paul. It'd be great to learn a little bit more about your previous role and what you're doing now.
Yeah, hi Mark. Thanks for having me. Great to be here on the famous Membership Talks. Yes, so I'm a freelance international consultant. So I work with membership bodies, professional institutions, associations, charities to essentially help them develop in international markets, help them to raise their profile internationally, or support them with any of their international projects or programs. I got into this really through having 15 odd years experience working in senior internationally facing roles in the membership sector. So I worked for a number of organizations. Most recently, I spent about 8 years with the Institution of Civil Engineers, ICE, who are a large professional body, headquarters in the UK, but with a global membership. At the ICE, I was regional director for international operations, so I managed global teams, and I was responsible for growing our membership and our membership operations and activity in a number of different international regions. I also led the ICE's market entry in the Gulf region, and that included setting up a regional office in 2017.
Okay.
The background.
Oh, great! Yeah, great background, and you're most definitely the right person to have on this edition to talk about that. But yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting. So a lot of our members, obviously, they have some organic growth in terms of international memberships in their existing portfolio. But I guess it'd be interesting to talk about how to identify where to put your time in, and I guess where's relevant to expand your international footprint.
Yeah, sure. So where do you start, right? For me, I think the key starting point really is about understanding your relevance as an organisation internationally. So getting a feel for how and where your product or your membership offer is going to be relevant. International is not one market, of course, it's many, so you may be more or less relevant in different regions. All membership organizations are different in their own right, so where and how you operate is going to depend on your profile and what it is that you offer to an extent, but and it's an incremental process as well, but I would start with this question of relevance. I think to stay relevant, generally that involves listening to industry. I think most membership organizations exist to support one industry or another, one sector or another. And they have to follow the latest industry trends in order to stay relevant. I mean, in fact, the best membership bodies also shape industry. They're leaders, not just followers. But and a lot of industries are by their nature international. They generally don't, with some exceptions, they generally don't operate in national silos. So neither should, by that logic, membership bodies. So I think, once you understand this question of relevance, then you can also look at things like, where are the gaps in the market, internationally? Where are the skills gaps in particular locations? Importantly, I think, what does the competition look like? Who else is doing what you do, and where are they? How does your affordability compare to theirs? I think, so these are some of the big, the kind of big questions to start with, really, that you're probably going to want to address first of all, in any sort of international or regional strategy. But I think a good starting place, especially if you're new to this, starting place could be to look at look at locations where there are areas of commonality. So you may already have a feel for where some of the opportunities may, for your organisation may lie internationally, based upon where key pockets of your existing members or your target audience might be based. So what I mean by this, so for example, let's say that your niche is, your traditional niche is upskilling UK professionals. Then a good starting point might be to look at international locations which have large numbers of UK or Western expats. That would be a sensible place to begin with, probably. When I was at the ICE, we invested a lot of time and resource in the Gulf region because we knew and we understood that those countries have very high levels of immigration. Construction and engineering sector, they're global hubs, particularly the UAE, with very high numbers of British and Western engineers and expats operating. So that was a logical place for us to look. So yeah, identifying those kind of areas of commonality.
And I guess with the expats, it's an easier footprint, isn't it? So you don't have to rewrite your content. It's going to be in language and relevant to those people, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, language is going to be an important consideration. Certainly if you're new to developing internationally, you don't want to get bogged down in translating lots of materials. So think about if and how someone without a strong level of English is going to be able to get that membership value from what you offer, and whether it's worth putting your effort into those locations.
Okay, yeah, it's very interesting. I was reading one of your blogs on your website, and we could talk about how people can contact you at the end. But yeah, completely right in terms of most industry is international. So follow where the industry is to sort of find where your membership could be most relevant to that sector. I've also seen, particularly with new and emerging industries, I've seen people use Google Trends. So you could type in a keyword, whether that's related to your membership offering, and you basically get a map of the world, and you can see where and who are interested in that particular topic. So I guess if you have literally no idea, that's another good place to start. But I imagine most of our members will have a good feel in terms of where's relevant on the industry side. But also everyone has pockets, don't they? Pockets of data which they can use as an initial footprint. They could maybe reach out to those members and try and understand their challenges in their particular country and expand on that. So if you've got some members, let's use them. Let's get some feedback from those people whilst sort of building up your business case. So yeah, I guess the next sort of area is we can't talk about anything without talking about the pandemic. So that we have to mention that. So have you seen a lot of kind of new opportunity sort of coming out as a result of the pandemic? Perhaps a lot more people are used to remote working, remote learning. Perhaps you don't necessarily need a physical footprint like you used to. Yeah, it'd be great to see sort of what you're hearing and seeing on your interactions at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, 2020 was obviously a pretty seismic year. Saw a lot of changes in, as you say, how many of us work, which are likely to have lasting consequences. I think the most obvious representation of this is in that transition to virtual meetings and events. So, I mean, clearly the technology existed before the pandemic, but its use has become a lot more mainstream. A lot more people are more comfortable operating in this environment. organisations have been through, those kind of teething periods, with the early lockdowns, and it's just become a lot more ingrained, I think. When you talk about sort of what opportunities this has created internationally, for me, the very simple fact that with most digital events you can reach anyone anywhere, that automatically enhances your reach quite significantly, and I think that's a really, it's a very basic principle, but it's very powerful, I think, particularly for small organisations, or those who haven't perhaps considered international markets in the past. So it's easier to reach new members. It's also easier to offer a better service and connectivity to existing members who are based in remote locations. And the technology is adapting all the time. It's constantly improving, and will continue to get better. Not to say that virtual is going to be better than physical. There's always going to be a desire for face-to-face, for sure. But I think going forward, I think the most successful membership bodies will use a hybrid of virtual and in person. I think that's going to be the most effective strategy for most. I think another probably undervalued benefit of virtual events, is the fact that it's possible also to bring together a lot more senior stakeholders in one virtual space. Then it's a lot easier to do that virtually than it is physically. So, if you're trying to target CEOs to attend your event, that can be quite hard to do, right? If they need to take a day out of their schedule to travel to an event, whereas if they only need to commit 30 minutes or an hour of their schedule, I think they're a lot more likely to commit, and that's a pretty powerful thing. If you're trying to get a lot of senior decision makers and senior stakeholders, you can do that comparatively easily, on a video screen. The more senior the person, the more precious their time is. So I think that's one of the kind of unsung benefits, really, of virtual meetings, is that ability to leverage that kind of senior stakeholder engagement, and that's been accentuated really by the conditions of the last 12 months.
Completely agree on the senior side. That's a great point to make, Paul. And as you say, the technology has come on a long way, and what's great about it is anyone can use it, even if you're a small membership organisation or a large. It doesn't matter. Everyone can use the same platform. The cost to entry is a lot less to hiring a big venue and having an annual conference, for example, as well as the reach, as you mentioned. So you can record all of that content. You can almost use the live event as the recording studio for the virtual content, couldn't you? So I can really see that the benefits of the hybrid event model going forward. And it's quite interesting in terms of the hybrid. A lot of people think of it as giving the people that can't travel the option to engage with the content, which might be an international audience. But the comment you made about the senior leaders that just don't have the time to take a day out of the office is a very valid point, and they're the decision makers, aren't they? We need them there. We need their opinion. We need them to be engaging with the content. So yeah, I think that's a very valid point on there.
Yeah, you're right. I think the pandemic has also shown that it's also demonstrated that you don't have to travel extensively in order to establish these kind of stakeholder relationships, to make these connections. People have been forced to become a lot more flexible in that respect. Business travel is no longer essential to closing a sale, or face to face is still going to be preferable, but the pandemic has shown it's not essential. And if we can fly less and reduce our carbon emissions and save money for organisations, and that's a good thing. especially for
Yeah,
those smaller budget conscious membership bodies. So
definitely.
all these things combined, I think, has made it probably easier to gain traction
Hmm.
in international markets than otherwise would have been.
Yeah, and I think another thing is kind of the audience has adopted this new technology as well. So everyone's used to doing WebExes now, video calls, where in 2019, I can't think of, I probably made one video call across the whole year, where nowadays it feels weird if I call someone on the mobile phone. Like you want to see people, you want to engage with them. So I think the audience behavior has definitely changed, which is sort of aligned with the advances in technology that you've mentioned. So yeah, real opportunity, and it kind of de-risks the international expansion, as you say. So you don't necessarily need a physical footprint initially. You can look to nurture and grow that audience virtually, and then at a later date you may decide that it's worth having an office out there, if you need to. I imagine your time at ICE, did you have a physical footprint first? Was that, and then you sort of built the audience from there, or how did that side work?
So when we were looking at our expansion in the Gulf, yeah, we had
Yep.
we were initially very reliant on members in that region, so we had big clusters of
Hmm.
members. But then talking to employers, it became apparent that there was a real demand for a more permanent presence. And that
Hmm.
part of the world, there's real traditional focus on a way of doing business based on trust built up over a long period of time, which happens to be face to face. But again,
Yep.
they've had to compromise. Everyone's had to compromise in the last 12 months. So that's
Hmm.
not necessarily the way that we might have gone in future. I mean, like putting staff on the ground and opening an office is sort of one end of the spectrum, if you like.
Yeah.
There are a lot of incremental steps that you take before getting to that point. And
Mm-hmm.
as you say, at the moment, whilst we're in the middle of a global pandemic still, it's not very feasible anyway. So I think at
Yeah.
the moment we need to talk about virtual. We
Yeah.
need to do that groundwork. That groundwork has to be done virtually.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it's really exciting, especially as over the next few months, physical events will start to open up again. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how that blend looks between in the hybrid model between virtual and physical,
Yeah.
and how it can add value really. So we've made all of these gains in technology. Let's keep that, but at the same time, we all love a physical event. You can't beat that physical offline immersive experience that you can't get in a virtual platform. So yeah, I think it's really exciting I guess, to see how membership organizations embrace that,
Yeah.
and yeah, to see what learnings that we could take forward into the next few years.
Yes. Yeah. I think digital events are going to be a good way to test the water in new
Yeah.
markets for sure. They're relatively low risk, relatively low cost. Ability to attract potentially much larger numbers of attendees.
Hmm. Hmm.
To target them to specific locations.
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably a separate conversation to be had about to what degree you charge for events, depending
Hmm.
on the nature of the event. The need to for membership organisations to kind of balance the need to protect their member value versus the desire to raise their
Hmm.
profile internationally.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there's a balance to be achieved there. There's some compromise, and certainly if you're looking at expanding into new markets, then charging for
Hmm.
those events is probably going to be less effective.
Yeah.
How you market those events is going to be really important.
Hmm. Hmm.
Platforms like LinkedIn are great, at minimal cost. Asking people to share your content.
Yeah.
I would just say my message to organisations would be just give it a try.
Yeah.
Just get out there and try it.
Yeah. And I think what else is sort of quite interesting, where you can deliver content more frequently. So rather than having your yearly annual congress, for example, where sometimes the content needs to be quite generic because you have such a large audience there. With the ability of hybrid and virtual, you can deliver niche content to a niche group of people on a niche topic in a niche country, because it's so much easier to generate that content. And as you say, it's less of a risk, because anyone can create virtual content, as long as they've got a laptop. They're able to. That cost to entry is really low now. So I think part of it is being able to tailor your content a lot faster than perhaps you would before. And kind of everyone's living room is a recording studio now, like where I am today and where you are. So everyone has that option, and as you say, let's keep embracing it. Let's keep creating relevant content, and that's only going to help expand in an international market. If you can really customize the content for that market, you can create virtual roundtables. You don't need to be there in person, as you mentioned. So yeah, I think it's a really exciting time at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, your point about content is really true, for sure. I mean, I guess for organisations who traditionally do this in the UK or in their own country, also thinking about when you start to target digital events into new markets, thinking about things like timing, scheduling your event at a time of day which is most likely to maximize attendance in your target market. Think about different working patterns. You know, in the Arab world, the working week runs from Sunday to Thursday, so being mindful of different working patterns, major public holidays, religious festivals, avoiding these where possible. There's a host of things to think about, but it's well worth, I think, getting out there and giving it a go.
Yeah, and I like the idea of if you have a small presence in terms of membership in that area, reaching out to them and send them a survey. When would you like an event? What would you like from local content? I think that's going to be the most valuable market research, isn't it? Sort of getting that insight from your current members. I think is really important to look at.
For sure, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. That's really interesting. And any other sort of tips and things to look out for?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of those initial, establishing that initial footprint, I think digital events, as we said, are a good way to test the water. Partnerships as well. That's another relatively low risk kind of easy way to try and establish a foothold and build momentum in a new location. So depending on the profile of your organisation, that might be partnerships with corporates. If you have relationships with a big multinational who has a presence in various locations around the world, that could be a good one to leverage. It might be an academic partnership if you're closely aligned with particular universities. Most universities have extensive international ties these days. Going back to ICE, when we were operating in the UAE, that's one of the world's biggest transnational education hubs. So there are dozens of UK universities with a physical presence in that country. So that was easy to leverage, relatively easy to leverage. So thinking about how partnerships can help you in the first
I think that's a really good point, because they already have that local network, don't they? So I think that's a great point.
Yeah. Governmental partnerships, NGOs, there are lots of bodies that can help membership organisations and advise them
Mm-hmm.
in terms of building up those local networks.
Definitely, and I guess like once you've built up traction in that market, what are your sort of feelings going forward on? Do you need to move to a feet on the street, if you like, a local footprint, or can you manage it all remotely? Will you ever need to go local?
It's a hard one to answer that because it's pretty subjective. I think it seems that office working is going to be less important than it was in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So building up those kind of regional hub offices will be less significant than in the past. There's going to be more flexible and agile working. I think the message really is that the membership organisations are embracing is the need to be flexible and agile. I mean, probably in the long run, if you're going to make significant traction, if you're really going to fundamentally change your business model, you probably need to have a physical presence in those countries. I would suggest. There's definitely a lot of traction that you could achieve virtually, but to make that leap to being a really significant growth market, you're probably going to need physical at some point.
Yes,
I would suggest, but that might not be in the form of as I said, setting up offices. It might be more flexible, agile workforce.
Yeah, I've seen sort of people looking at obviously the hybrid model. We traditionally think a physical event and a virtual element, but I'm seeing people look at like a multi-site event all happening at the same time. So obviously it will depend on time differences, for example. But if you can have your events in different locations around the world, all running at the same time, and then obviously if you have a keynote speaker, you can broadcast it into the different locations. So yeah, that seems quite a nice idea. Again, as long as the time zones allow for that. So then you're getting the benefit of sort of pulling your audience together internationally, but also having that physical connection and networking that people will always need. So yeah, that's quite an interesting concept to look at as well. That's great, Paul. I'm just sort of thinking of anything else that you think we've maybe missed that might be of interest to our audience.
I think, I mean, so we've talked about things like relevance and where are the gaps in the market, what's the competition. That's sort of your broad strategy. I think there's probably another layer underneath that of a more more practical considerations that can, little things that combined, if you can get them right, will improve your customer experience and give them the best experience and improve your attractiveness to an international audience. So I'm talking about practical things here, like around communications. So, and in an ideal world, you would have a top-down commitment to international that runs throughout the organisation, which would make this kind of stuff a lot easier. But that that might not necessarily be the case. So things like is your website properly geared to international customers? Can you reduce or eliminate any of that sort of UK or country-specific language? Is it easy to understand? Is key information easy to understand if English is not your first language? At a minimum, it should be easy to understand the membership journey and where to find the information they need. Are the images on your website culturally sensitive and sufficiently diverse? Those kind of things. And another practical things like telephone numbers. Are they listed in international format? Can international customers call toll free? What will they hear if they call outside of UK working hours?
That's true.
If you're capturing personal information, are contact forms and the like compatible with international address formats? Asking, if you're doing questionnaires, there are certain sort of diversity questions. For example, questions around sexual orientation might cause offence in certain parts of the world, so you want to think about how you use those where you're operating. What else? I mean, postal. If you're routinely sending out postal communications, postal services can be unreliable in some parts of the world. Is it really worth it? Are you likely to experience customs issues? Those kind of considerations, and also thinking about, you're not going to be the only touch point within your organisation with your international customer. So thinking about their customers' interactions with other teams, customer service, or your membership subscriptions team. Have they got the capacity and the capability to deal with international inquiries? Are they briefed on how to deal with, can they be sensitive to those without English as a first language? Do they understand what benefits international customers can receive and access? Again, I think you talk quite a bit about the importance of local members and volunteers and how you can leverage those. It can be useful, to have local members that you can call on to in specific international locations that you can draw on as a sort of secondary point of information. When you have a new member, you can also to supplement the advice and information you're giving from headquarters, to provide that local perspective as well. That could be quite important.
I think that'd be good to have. You could almost have local community groups, couldn't you, where your audience in that location can engage and help each other. I think that could be quite an interesting one to explore as well.
Yeah. I think if you have those, clusters of existing members internationally, then you should use them. You should happily use them. What else? Payment options. Are they simple and accessible for international customers? Not really talked about it. The question of affordability as well. So, how will thinking about how will currency exchange rates affect your pricing and affordability? If you're going to go down the route of sort of offering tiered pricing for different locations, you want to probably think about doing that in a way that's not going to alienate members elsewhere. So, for example, you might offer things like discount booking codes that members in certain locations can use. There are various ways around that, but certainly being mindful of affordability and how that's going to affect your membership offer.
Definitely. I mean, it's obviously a very wide sort of conversation, isn't it? So it's hard to go into anything in too much detail. But I think what would be good, obviously, when the audience listens to this video, if they want to add comments, if you're able to pick those up, if people have additional questions, I think that'd be great. And just sort of wary of your time as well, Paul. But yeah, if our audience want to get in touch with you directly, I know you have some interesting content on your website as well. So if you're able to talk about how people can get in touch, that'd be great as well.
Yeah, sure. So I've got a paulgordonconsulting.co.uk, pretty basic website with hopefully some interesting blog content and all my contact details there. But yeah, happy to pick up any questions that come up as a result of this session, and to provide any further feedback.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much for your time, Paul. That's been really interesting. Some really good points that I guess people can consider, which they may not have thought about before. But yeah, no, thank you very much for your time, and it makes me want to go on holiday now with all of these different locations. So yeah, hopefully that will happen soon.